The sound of a perfect gunshot echoed through the stillness of the elite shooting club, a place where precision was measured in breaths and status dripped from every bead of cold sweat on the brow. Applause followed, not the kind you'd hear at a fine arts performance, but the kind that blended admiration with flattery, from a crowd clad in custom-designed shooting gear worth more than a middle-class family's monthly income. At the center of that spotlight stood Logan Whitmore, 44, lowering his custom Remington rifle, a self-satisfied smile spreading across his tanned face. On the electronic target screen at the far end, a perfect bullseye glowed. Still the king of this place. One of the men behind him chuckled, nodding in awe. Logan gave a slight nod in return, the kind that said, acknowledged without needing to speak. Here money and skill were the twin arms of power. Logan had both. Damn, the guy hasn't missed a single shot in 3 months. Well, yeah, Remington sponsors all his gear. Their murmurs blended into the ambient hum of a space that was both opulent and cold, as if each bullet fired, cut through not just targets, but through prejudices, hierarchies, and human worth. But if you've ever been overlooked because of your clothes, your origins, or your silence, maybe you'll want to stay for what comes next. A moment that might seem small, but would change everything. The glass doors slid open, and Clara Bennett stepped inside. No one looked up. Wearing a slightly faded navy cardigan jeans from a discount store and carrying an old leather bag, she all but blended into the gray of the high-end space like a dandelion in a garden of imported roses. At 38, Clara was no longer young enough to turn heads, nor powerful enough to command presence. She walked to the reception desk. A blonde woman with a flawless red lip was intently focused on her screen. When she looked up, her eyes scanned Clara from the wrinkled shoes to the neat bun at the back of her head and immediately dropped again, as if dismissing an irrelevant distraction. "Excuse me." Clara's voice was soft but clear. "I'd like to register for today's open session." The typing stopped for a few seconds. "Membership card?" the receptionist asked her, smile robotic eyes colder than steel. Clara took a breath. She opened her bag and pulled out a slightly creased envelope. Inside was a single-day pass with the club's name printed on it. "It's a gift, just for today." Laughter erupted from near the cafe lounge inside. Someone had overheard, and someone was now watching. Logan Whitmore half turned his gaze, locking onto Clara, like a hawk spotting a sparrow that had wandered into its sky. "Well, well," he said loudly on purpose. "Looks like Walmart lost a cashier today." Laughter echoed behind him like a well-orchestrated performance. Clara didn't respond. She bowed slightly, thanked the receptionist, and quietly walked toward the basic shooting lanes. "I shouldn't have come here." The thought ran through her mind. Part of her wanted to turn and leave immediately, but deeper inside, something stirred, something unfamiliar, yet no longer foreign memory. She placed her bag on a bench in the training corner, unzipped it, took out a carefully wrapped cloth bundle. Inside was a Glock 19. Not the shiny, customized type others use, but clean and well-maintained, accurate enough to say what needed saying. From a distance, Logan was still watching. He was used to being the center of attention, and any disruption to the rhythm of his domain made him uneasy in ways he wouldn't admit. "What's she doing?" someone asked. "Wasting time or missing targets?" In the worst way, Logan smirked. He stepped down from the VIP area and strolled toward the unfamiliar woman like a predator closing in on its prey. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, voice sugar-coated but thorny. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This is a shooting range, not a knitting circle." Clara looked up, her light brown eyes meeting Logan's icy blue stare. "Just here to fire a few rounds," she replied calmly. That steadiness gave Logan a momentary pause, but then he chuckled. $10,000 says, "You can't hit a bullseye at 50 yards. If you win, I pay. If you lose, you leave. For good deal." Clara looked at her left hand. A simple gold ring still sat quietly on her ring finger. She turned it slowly, a reflex now muscle memory. "Deal," she said almost inaudibly, but just enough. As Clara lifted the Glock, the atmosphere shifted. Back straight, shoulders relaxed, feet grounded, grip steady, breath deep, and even then held halfway. Bang, bungs. The shots rang out crisp and sharp, no flinch, no hesitation. That sound sliced through the elite club's grandeur, like a single distinct note in an otherwise dull symphony. All eyes turned to the far training corner, where Clara held her stance motionless. No one saw where the bullets had landed, but then The familiar whir of the target system began drawing the sheet slowly back from the distance. Each inch the target moved felt like it pounded in the hearts of those watching. Did she hit anything? Did she even come close? Or was it as embarrassing as everyone expected? Logan Whitmore crossed his arms, still smiling, but there was now a trace of uncertainty in his eyes. The target stopped in front of them, a single perfect hole, dead center in the bullseye. Silence fell. The room seemed to lose all sound for several seconds. Then the whispers began. She hit center. No way, she actually did it. Clara placed the Glock back on the stand. Neatly, no rush, no pride. Just the motions of someone who had done it 1,000 times. Logan yanked the target close, holding it up to his face as if physics might offer an explanation for the impossible. Beginner's luck, he muttered now, visibly irritated. Anyone can be lucky once. But this wasn't luck. In Clara's mind, images from the past rewound like an old film. To be continued in part 2. 3 years earlier, Arlington, a light rain fell. The sky was gray. A precisely folded American flag was placed in Clara's hands, heavier than anything she had ever held. Captain James Bennett, Navy SEAL sniper, was being laid to rest with full honors. The honor guard fired 21 shots into the sky. The echoes of those blasts still rang in Clara's ears each night. The official report killed in a helicopter crash during a covert operation. Clara knew more. She'd read between the lines of redacted files. She understood what couldn't be said, and the secrets James had carried with him to the grave. And before that, Clara had been just an accountant living in a modest apartment in Burlington, Vermont. She met James one ordinary afternoon in a cafe, a moment neither of them realized would become fate. He was there visiting a teammate recovering from injury. She was working on a tax report for a client. A glance, an apology after brushing shoulders, a conversation that never ended for 3 straight hours. 6 months later, they married by the lake, just a few friends and James's teammates in attendance, all silent, watchful like sentries protecting a general. Clara wasn't born strong. She learned it from waiting, from sleepless nights when the phone didn't ring, from the way James would return with fresh scars and older, quieter eyes. Once when James had a knee injury and was forced to take a break from training, he brought her to a shooting range. If I'm not around, you need to know how to protect yourself. What started as a basic lesson became a ritual. Once Clara hit center after nearly 10 attempts, James stared at her, stunned. You're a natural. Your hands are steady. Your eyes are exact, and your mind, calm like still water. You don't shake Clara. You never did. From that moment on, every time he returned, they'd go to the range. Even if just to stand silently together, sharing a quiet only the two of them understood. Before his last mission, James looked at her longer than usual, then said gently, "If anything ever happens, promise me one thing, keep practicing. Even if you no longer need it, it'll keep me close." Clara nodded, not fully grasping what he meant at the time. But now she understood more clearly than ever. Back in the present with the crowd still stunned, and Logan Whitmore's confusion quietly festering, Clara softly said, "I came here to practice, that's all." But inside, a voice echoed warm and deep like a whisper carried by bullets. "Do you see, James? I didn't forget I kept my promise." That afternoon, Clara left the elite shooting club without looking back. She walked slowly her steps, even as if trying to savor the feel of the breeze brushing her cheeks. She no longer heard the murmurs behind her, nor did she care what anyone might be saying. But inside her, something had shifted. Not pride, not triumph, but a kind of resurrection. A part of her that had been buried alongside James in Arlington had just opened its eyes for the first time in 3 years. Her apartment was nestled in a quiet neighborhood on the south side of Boston. A small space just enough for a woman living a life that asked for little. Everything was tidy, simple except for a single wooden box tucked deep beneath the bookshelf, locked with a small brass key. Clara took out the key and opened the box. Inside lay a neatly folded American flag, a bundle of handwritten letters, a leather-bound notebook, and 3 military medals arranged with care. At the very bottom was a photograph her and James on their wedding day. He wore his uniform. She wore a simple white dress. They were laughing, not looking at the camera, but at each other. She took out the notebook and turned the pages. James's personal training log. The handwriting was even meticulous, the penmanship of someone who lived by precision. Clara, 50 yards, 9-10, bullseyes. Stance, stable, reflex, instinctive. Notes, uncanny, calm, under pressure. Some people don't know they're shooters until the weapon is in their hands. Clara stared at the words, her finger brushing across the faded ink. 3 years was long enough to forget many things, but not pain. Not the restless dreams triggered by distant helicopters in the night. Not the way she sometimes woke at 3 a.m. with the sensation that someone had been lying beside her, only to find emptiness. After the funeral, Clara had locked away all of James's weapons in a safe, telling herself she'd never touch anything related to war again. But then a week ago, a strange envelope had arrived at her door. Sender Liam Carter, James's longtime comrade. Inside was a single-day pass to the elite shooting club and a short handwritten note. James would want you to keep your promise. 3 years is enough, Clara. It's time to rejoin the world. Clara had hesitated the entire night. She held the pass in her hand, turning it like a key that unlocked dusty memories. And then on that fateful morning, she dressed in the simplest outfit, put on her old shoes, and walked into a world she thought she no longer belonged in. She didn't expect that first shot would reopen a door that had been shut for 3 years. That evening, Clara sat alone on her small apartment balcony, a cup of hot tea in hand, watching the quiet traffic below. A new message appeared on her phone. Liam Carter. You did great, Bennett words, getting out across the community. And that man, Whitmore, he's not going to let it go. Clara didn't reply immediately. She typed a few words, then deleted them. Instead, she opened James's notebook again, flipping to a page near the center one, with a slanted note ink more forceful than the rest. There will come a day when Clara stands alone in front of the world. When that day comes, she won't flinch. She'll fire. Clara let out a soft laugh, one laced with tears. That day has come. James, and I'm still standing. She didn't know what lay ahead. She didn't know Logan Whitmore had already begun quietly investigating her. She didn't know her story would soon spread through the shooting world and local media. But there was one thing she knew for certain. She was ready for the second shot. Elite Shooting Club, Thursday afternoon. A dry metallic clinking echoed through the hallway, carried by a soft draft, the kind of ambient noise that usually blended into the background. But today it felt different. Silence no longer belonged to focus. It belonged to anticipation. It had been a week since Clara Bennett's shot of silence, but its reverberations still lingered in the club. Some called it luck. Others whispered that she'd been professionally trained. But Logan Whitmore, the man publicly embarrassed, was quietly preparing something much bigger. And then he appeared. Crisp footsteps, white shirt, perfectly pressed. A Rolex caught the light. Logan wasn't wearing his usual smug half-smile. He strode directly into the main hall, where Clara was adjusting her Glock on the firing counter. Well, he said, his voice measured and theatrical. Looks like I misjudged you. Clara looked up, expression calm. That's all right. Everyone does sometimes. Soft chuckles rose from the back. The air was strung tight. Logan nodded slowly. From inside his jacket, he pulled out an unsigned check and placed it gently on the table in front of her. Let's settle this, shall we? Clara looked at the check, then at him. She said nothing. 3 bullets, 3 shots, 75 yards. If you hit 3 bullseyes, I'll donate $50,000 to a charity of your choice. If you miss even one, just one, you leave this club forever. No coming back. The room fell still, like someone had turned off the air itself. 1 shot could be luck, 2 might suggest skill, 3 unbelievable. Clara remained silent. Her left hand idly rotated the scratched wedding band on her finger. Then she spoke clear and steady. If I win, all the money goes to the Warriors Legacy Foundation for veterans with PTSD and reintegration support. And if I lose, I'll leave. No complaints. Logan arched an eyebrow, pleased with her confidence. Looks like we've got a show, gentlemen and ladies. Within minutes, the firing range was cleared and reset. Even members who usually treated the club as a casual playground for the elite now gathered near the spectator glass. A few local sports reporters had arrived, alerted to the spectacle. Cameras were already rolling. The mood was no longer private. It was public. It was personal. Sophia Ramsey, the club's manager and a former national shooting champion herself, approached Clara just before she stepped onto the line. Ms. Bennett, Clara turned to face her, nodding once. I've seen many people with talent, Sophia said, lowering her voice. But I've also seen them crumble under pressure. Are you sure? Clara looked Sophia straight in the eyes. I live beside the best marksman I've ever known. He taught me never to let outside noise shake my hands. Sophia hesitated, then returned the nod. A quiet respect had formed between them. Clara stepped into the lane, The Glock 19 rested in her hands once more, as familiar now as it had been in the days when James stood beside her. No music, no announcements, just a woman and a target 75 yards away. Inhale, hold, focus through the sight. Exhale, halfway. Squeeze, don't pull. Bangs, the first bullet cut through the air faster than anyone could track. Target retracted bullseye. Clara didn't flinch, she didn't smile, she simply shifted her feet slightly and adjusted her wrist. Youst. Second shot, another perfect center. The crowd was dead silent, not out of tension but from disbelief. Before the third, Clara paused. She bowed her head slightly, placing one hand over her heart. "James," she whispered, "this one's for you." Bang! The machine reeled in the final target. The dragging sound of the motor stretched time itself. Target stopped. Bullseye perfect again. The audience stood frozen for a few heartbeats, then erupted. Cheers. Whistles. Applause shook the walls. People who had never looked twice at Clara now leaned forward, stunned, smiling, amazed. Sophia Ramsey stepped forward, her voice a little shaky. "Ms. Bennett, that was a flawless performance. Congratulations." Clara nodded and for the first time said her name aloud. Clara Bennett. Sophia looked at her with completely new eyes, no longer with doubt or pity, but with admiration. At the back, Logan Whitmore stood motionless, jaw tight. He forced a dry smile. "A lucky day, but 3 times in a row." "Interesting." No one replied, because no one was looking at him anymore. The spotlight, the stage, the moment, all now belonged to Clara Bennett. And this was only the beginning. That night, high above the Charles River, on the 32nd floor of a glass-clad building, Logan Whitmore poured scotch into a crystal glass. The clink of liquor hitting glass sounded like grains of sand slipping through an hourglass time judgment. Pride all slipping away. On the massive screen in his living room, slow-motion footage played on a loop Clara's 3 shots from earlier that day. Over and over, he watched every motion, the way she planted her feet, the way she breathed, the way her eye never blinked behind the sight. "That is not an amateur," he muttered. "No one shoots like that without training." Logan's grip around the glass tightened. His knuckles whitened. He could stomach a lot, but public humiliation that he could not. And this wasn't just any crowd. This had happened in front of the elite, the press, political donors, and even some of his most influential sponsors. He picked up his phone and dialed. "I need a full background check on someone. Name, Clara Bennett. Age 38, lives in Boston. I want everything where she's lived, worked, studied, anyone she's connected to. Are you thinking military background? I'm not guessing. I'm certain." The next morning in her modest apartment, Clara sat at the breakfast table with a now cold cup of coffee. Her phone lit up a missed call from Liam Carter. She returned the call. "Clara, are you all right? More or less. What's going on? I think you should know, Whitmore's digging. He's got people looking into your past." "I figured as much. And I'm guessing he'll soon find out about James." There was a pause. Every time James's name was spoken aloud, Clara's chest tightened, not from fragility, but from how real he still felt. "Let him. I have nothing to hide." Across the city in a private investigation office, Logan stood holding a report. Red ink marked key findings like blood across a battlefield. Or name Clara Ann Bennett, age 38, current occupation. Senior accountant at Meridian Financial, previous residence, Virginia Beach, marital status. Widowed spouse, Captain James Bennett, U.S. Navy, SEAL Team 6, KIA 3 years ago. His eyes narrowed on the final note. Rumored she was personally trained in firearm handling by her late husband as a form of self-protection. Attached below is a copy of an old military tribute article on Captain James Bennett, codename The Phantom, one of the most accurate snipers to ever serve. Rumor had it, he once hit a target over 2,000 yards away, a distance beyond the limits of human sight. Logan's breath shortened. This wasn't just about being shown up by a skilled woman. He was being dismantled by a ghost, a legend through the hands of the woman he left behind. That same day at Clara's office, Sophia Ramsey, manager of the elite shooting club, knocked on the door. "I know I shouldn't be here, but I need a private word." Clara led her into a side meeting room, knowing this wasn't a courtesy call. Clara Sophia began, voice lowered. "Whitmore is pressuring the board to launch an investigation into last week's wager. He's saying you may have cheated, that 3 bullseyes at 75 yards is impossible without special equipment. Clara didn't react. She exhaled slowly, deeply. I didn't use anything, just the Glock. And what I know, Sophia nodded. I believe you. I've reviewed everything. It's clean, but you should prepare yourself. He's planning something else, a public match, official televised. Clara raised an eyebrow. For what? To reclaim the narrative, to crush you publicly. That night, the Elite Shooters Club's social media pages pinned a bold announcement. Official, a head-to-head competition between club champion Logan Whitmore and challenger Clara Bennett. 10 stations, 10 firearms. Varying distances. All weapons are provided by the club to ensure fairness. This coming Saturday, open to the public, televised live. Hundreds of comments followed. Who even is she? No way she's a rookie. Shoots like the military. If she wins again, I'm calling her a legend. And if she loses, still respect. Who else would face Whitmore head-on? Clara read the announcement and then closed her laptop. She retrieved an old leather bag from the closet and for the first time in 3 years, opened the gun safe that held James's collection. Inside was more than weaponry. It was a memory legacy, and a voice quiet, resolute rose inside her, like a memory playing on vinyl. This isn't about winning. It's about not stepping back. You can shoot Clara. You don't need to win. You just need to stand. Clara smiled. It wasn't joy. It was knowing. Knowing what had to be done. Stand. Monday morning, Boston. A light drizzle fell over the city, the kind of November rain that soaks slowly, almost thoughtfully. Clara woke earlier than usual. She stood before the mirror, tying her hair back, staring into her own reflection. This was no longer the woman who bowed her head to avoid attention. No longer the widow running from ghosts. Today she made a decision to take a week off work the first time in 3 years. Not to run, to prepare. That afternoon, Clara drove to an old military training range on the outskirts of the city. It had once been restricted, but now open to the public on certain days. She hadn't chosen it for convenience, but because it held one of the few civilian-available Macmillan TAC 338 sniper rifles, the same model Logan had demanded as the final weapon in the challenge. She rented the range for 3 full days. No interruptions. Clara had never truly used the Macmillan before. What she knew came from James, from watching him memorizing every adjustment he made as if it were a language only she was meant to learn. She opened James's training notebook. Ideal range, 800-1200 yards. Wind deviation, adjust using this compensation table. Never trust the scope. Trust your breath. Tuesday afternoon. She was still adjusting her aim when a vehicle engine rumbled behind her. A black SUV rolled to a stop near the edge of the range government plates. A tall man stepped out wearing plain clothes, but carrying a military presence, upright posture, and sharp eyes that scanned everything. Clara squinted. You don't look like a sports shooter. The man smiled politely. Wilson Commander, SEAL Team 3. I served with James in Baghdad in 2016. You probably don't remember me, but I remember he talked about you more than anyone else. Clara nodded, cautious. Why are you here? Wilson paused, then pulled out a small notebook. A separate log James had kept specifically on long-range rifles. Not the one. Clara had a companion piece. He gave this to me, Sayed, to hold it. In case it ever needed to be passed on, I think now is the time. Clara took it gently, her hands trembling just slightly. 4:01 p.m. The wind shifted. Clara lay prone on the mat, eye pressed to the scope. Target at 900 yards. Bang. The first shot landed wide right of center. She didn't flinch, no frustration. She simply made a note and started over. Bang. The second shot clipped the edge of the inner ring. Wilson stood behind her, hands in pockets, voice low. James taught you right, but the Macmillan punishes every mistake. It forgives no one. They trained together for nearly 3 hours. As the sun set, Clara fired 3 consecutive shots, all dead center at 1,000 yards. She said nothing. She simply removed her headset, laid the rifle down, and looked up into the sky. For the first time in years, she didn't feel fear. That evening, back at her apartment, Clara opened her laptop and saw a new message from Sophia Ramsey, manager of the Elite Shooters Club. Clara Whitmore just revised the terms. 10 stations, 10 firearms. Macmillan, TAC 338 will be used at the final station. One more thing. That final station will now count for 30% of the total score. The board has approved it. Clara exhaled a quiet smirk playing at the corner of her mouth. Of course Logan knew her weakest point, or at least where he thought she was weakest, and he was betting everything on it. Wednesday morning, Clara returned to the range. The wind was stronger. She came alone this time. With her, she carried James's notebook, a pair of worn leather gloves, and her wedding ring still resting on her finger. She practiced every movement, loading rounds, adjusting windage timing, her breath between shots. She wasn't shooting with her eyes. She was shooting with memory, with stillness, with the silence of 3 years lived in reflection. Each bullet was like a whisper to someone no longer there. You believed I could shoot James now? I believe it too. Oh, Wednesday night, Clara called Liam Carter. You busy for you never. You once said James used to talk about me a lot. Was that true? Almost every time he drank, Liam chuckled. We used to tease him. Said he married a poet with a trigger finger. Every time you hit a bullseye, he'd grin and say, "That's not reflex. That's music in her blood." Clara laughed a real full laugh. Will you be there? All of us will. You're not alone. Later that night, Clara opened the old wooden box again. Beneath the folded flag was a photograph, James standing behind her at the range, hands resting on her shoulders, smiling brightly. She traced her fingers over his image. Not in mourning. In memory and connection. I'm not fighting for pride. I'm fighting for a promise. Saturday match day. Elite Shooters Club was packed before sunrise. The parking lot was full. Journalists lined the entrance and camera crews were already setting up tripods and lights. What had started as a private grudge match had now turned into a public event, a spectacle. But for many watching, it had become something more, a symbol of privilege versus perseverance, of surface glory versus silent strength. In the changing room behind the main range, Clara dressed in a simple navy blue shirt, dark jeans, and low-profile leather shoes. No sponsor patches, no slogans, no bravado. Just one quiet emblem, a wedding ring still on her left hand. She stood in front of the mirror and looked herself in the eyes. Not to win, but to stand. You'll be with me like always. Novit Caesarem. The main hall gleamed under bright lights. Giant LED displays showed the scoreboard and match timer. On the central podium, the announcer's voice boomed across the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's special event. Challenger Clara Bennett. Defending champion Logan Whitmore. 10 shooting stations. 10 weapon types, time-limited precision scored. The final station accounts for 30% of the total score. Whispers and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some stood and cheered. Others leaned forward, studying every expression on Clara's face. At the back row, Liam Carter and 4 SEAL team, 6 veterans sat in silence, upright, alert, unshakable. Station 1, Glock 17, 25 yards. Logan went first. Efficient cold, 10 shots, 9 bullseyes, time 22 seconds. Applause followed. Clara stepped up. No theatrics, no hesitation. She squared her shoulders, leveled her breath. Bung bung bung. 10 rounds en boldes. A few judges exchanged glances before confirming. Clara Bennett, a perfect score, time 24 seconds. Clara took the early lead. Station 2, Beretta M9, 30 yards. The Beretta kicked harder than Clara was used to. Her 5th shot veered slightly outside the bullseye. Logan caught up. The scoreboard narrowed. Stations 3 and 4 followed. Both competitors remained neck and neck. Logan was faster, sharper. He moved like a machine. But Clara, while slightly slower, was eerily consistent. Station 6, Zeke Sauer, PSS. Her first round was too heavy on the trigger. She paused, closed her eyes. Her thumb brushed the worn ring on her finger. When the conditions aren't perfect, don't fight the weapon. Listen to it. Breathe with it. James, she opened her eyes. The next bullet found the center. After Station 7, Logan led by 4 points. He began playing to the crowd louder, showier. After each volley, he turned grinning as if the cameras were meant for him. Clara didn't flinch. Station 8, Mossberg shotgun, 15 yards, clay targets. Logan shattered 8 out of 10. Clara shattered 9. The crowd stirred. Momentum was shifting. Station 9, CZ Shadow, 5 fast-moving targets. Clara's reflexes shone. Clara Bennett, 5 targets hit. Time 13 seconds. Logan stepped up, pressure showing now. Or a 5-1 missed due to a subtle trigger snag. His face darkened. He walked back, jaw clenched. Now, only one station remained. Station 10, Macmillan, TAC 338, 75 yards, precision sniper shot. The rifle sat on a bench under harsh white lights. Clara's eyes met it, familiar yet daunting. Logan approached, first adjusted the settings confidently and took the position. He fired 10 rounds 9 inside the inner ring. Applause roared. He rose smugly, bowing to the crowd. Now it was Clara's turn. She stepped forward. Something felt off. She touched the scope's subtle misalignment. The elevation had been tampered with, adjusted 2 notches too high. She didn't say a word. Instead, she opened James's notebook. The last page, slanted handwriting, read, "When equipment fails to be neutral, trust your skill. Everything else is an illusion." Clara adjusted the scope, not for victory, for honor. Shot 1, bullseye. Shot 2, bullseye. Shot 3, bullseye. The crowd held its breath. 8 perfect shots. Then she paused. She looked up past the range towards something invisible. Her fingers brushed her chest over her heart. "One last shot. For you, James." Bing. The screen lit up. Station 10. Clara Bennett. 10-10 bullseyes. Perfect. The crowd erupted. A standing ovation. Shouts, cheers, tears. The noise shook the rafters. Sophia Ramsey walked up, her voice cracked with emotion. "Clara Bennett, you have redefined what it means to be a marksman. Congratulations." Clara nodded, calm. She spoke her name again. Clara Bennett. This time it echoed like a declaration. Logan stood off to the side, silent, jaw tight. He stepped forward and extended a hand. "You shoot? Well, I didn't expect that." Clara looked at the hand, then shook it lightly. "I don't need praise. I was keeping a promise." Hours later, Clara sat alone in the competitors' lounge. Outside, the press buzzed, the fans roared, and her name chanted like a legend. She placed her wedding ring beside James's notebook, closed her eyes. "I did it, James. Not for the win, but because I didn't run." Meanwhile, in the club's security room, Sophia Ramsey and a technician were combing through surveillance footage. "Are you sure about this?" the technician asked. "I've been silent long enough," Sophia replied, eyes fierce. They slowed the footage to frame by frame. At Station 10, a man in technician gear, no name badge, adjusted the sniper scope 3 hours before the match. Zoom in. The face appeared, Logan Whitmore's personal assistant. Sophia uploaded the video to the club's board of directors and CC'd 3 of the most respected sports journalists in the city. That evening, during the official press conference following the competition, Clara Bennett was invited to speak. Behind her, a large banner fluttered beneath the spotlight, honoring the silent marksman, in tribute to Clara Bennett. Cameras flashed in rapid succession, microphones jutted out from every angle. The MC leaned in, smiling with anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen, here stands the woman who redefined courage, integrity, and what it means to overcome judgment. Please welcome Clara Bennett." Thunderous applause erupted, but Clara didn't immediately step forward. Instead, her gaze swept across the audience, and stopped. Logan Whitmore was seated in the 3rd row, alone. His face was sullen, hollow. There was no trace of the swagger that once ruled every corner of this club. Beside him sat 2 men in black suits, investigators from the Sports Ethics Council. Clara stepped up, calm and composed. She took the microphone, her voice low but unwavering. "I didn't come here to win a title. I came to honor a promise made to a man who gave everything for honor." She paused, letting the room settle into silence. "Let me say this. A perfect shot doesn't prove you're the best, but how you respond to the truth, especially when it hurts, shows the world who you really are." There were no cheers, only silence, reverent, contemplative. The following morning, headlines dominated both local and national media. "Fallen champion, Whitmore caught, tampering in final match, Clara Bennett, a new symbol of honor and precision. Widow of SEAL, Team 6. Sniper topples, the king of the range." At a hastily convened press conference, the Elite Shooters Club's board announced, effective immediately, Logan Whitmore is stripped of all titles won in the past 5 years due to ethical violations. He is suspended from all official competitions for 3 years. The matter has been referred to authorities for a formal investigation into financial misconduct and sports fraud. That afternoon, Clara and Sophia Ramsey met at a quiet cafe near the Charles River. Sophia stirred her coffee in silence before speaking. "I should have acted sooner. I saw the signs. I stayed quiet." Clara shook her head. But you spoke up when it mattered, and you stood on the right side. Sophia slid an envelope across the table. The board has made a decision. They want to offer you an honorary supervisory role at the club to help mentor female shooters and help us rebuild our code of ethics. Clara opened the envelope. No contract. Just a single sheet of paper with a new heading. Integrity doesn't need to be proven. It only needs to be practiced. Clara smiled gently. I'll think about it. That evening, back in her apartment, Clara carefully placed her wedding ring back on the shelf. Not as a symbol of loss, but of strength. It would remain there not to mourn the past, but to honor what she carried forward. A week after the competition, Clara's inbox overflowed. A top weapons manufacturer offered her a brand ambassador deal. A national sports channel proposed an exclusive commentator role. A publisher wanted to buy the rights to her life story. From widow to warrior, the Clara Bennett journey. She read every line, then quietly deleted them. That afternoon, Clara paid a visit to the Warriors Legacy Foundation, where the $50,000 prize from the wager had already been donated. The director retired. Colonel James Harrison greeted her with a firm handshake and deep respect. You've done something remarkable, not just by beating a champion, but by reminding us why heroes like James Bennett were called the Silent Warriors. At the mention of James, Clara lowered her head, not in pain, but in quiet reverence. The grief had shifted. It was no longer bleeding. It was part of her blood now, and it flowed with peace. I didn't win because I wanted to. She said I shot because I owed him a promise. That's what all. Inside the training hall, veterans-turned-instructors were guiding a group of young trauma survivors through basic shooting drills. Among them was a young woman 22 years old, with burn scars on her left hand, nervously holding a pistol for the first time. Clara approached gently. What's your name? Natalie, the girl whispered. Are you scared? Natalie nodded, eyes glassy. Clara knelt beside her, resting a hand lightly over hers. Good fear means you're still in the fight, and I'll be here until the day you believe in yourself. 3 weeks later, a new program was officially launched. Marksman for Reintegration, a therapeutic firearms training initiative for veterans, trauma survivors, and individuals battling PTSD. The mission was simple yet powerful: to use controlled marksmanship not as a weapon of violence, but as a tool of healing. Clara was named the inaugural instructor. She didn't wear a uniform. No titles, no introductions. She simply stood before each new class with her Glock in hand and an unwavering gaze in her eyes. We are not here to learn how to fight. We are here to remember who we are. And sometimes amid the sound of gunfire, you may finally hear a voice you thought you'd lost forever. 1 month later, at the Foundation's annual fundraising gala, Clara was invited to the stage. She declined. Instead, she stepped aside and gestured for someone else to take the spotlight. A young woman walked out Natalie. Her hands trembled slightly as she held up a small wooden sign, written in black paint. 6 months ago, I was afraid to even hold a gun. Today I'm teaching others. Thank you to the woman who saw me when the world didn't. The entire ballroom rose to their feet in silence. Then came applause, not for fame, not for spectacle, but for something purer recognition. Clara sat quietly in the back row, hands folded. She didn't cry, but she instinctively turned the wedding ring on her finger, not out of grief, but of gratitude. A week later, Clara received an official letter from the Elite Shooters Club. We respectfully invite you to return as a lifetime honorary member. Furthermore, we wish to invite you to help shape a new code of honor, one we intend to name the Bennett Code. She read it once, then closed the envelope. Outside her apartment window, the autumn light spilled gently over the rooftops. Warm quiet, she looked out and whispered, James, turns out keeping your promise leads you exactly where you were meant to be. 1 year later, a newly named facility stood quietly on the northern outskirts of Boston, nestled beside a whispering tree line. The James Bennett Center, home of the Marksman for Reintegration program. On an early autumn morning, Clara Bennett walked the hallway with a clipboard in hand, reviewing the names of a new class of trainees. She wore a khaki jacket, jeans, and worn leather shoes. Nothing about her said hero, but to the students she passed, she was more than an instructor. She was living proof. Proof that sometimes the most extraordinary strength lies in the most silent of people, those who never ask to be noticed. That afternoon, the 1-year anniversary celebration, A canopy had been set up in the backyard of the center. Small American flags lined the fence. A bronze plaque had been unveiled in honor of Master Chief James Bennett. The Phantom, some warriors lead in silence, others through those they leave behind. Natalie now, Clara's assistant instructor, stepped up to the microphone. Her voice shook slightly at first. I used to think I was broken, but then a woman taught me something I'll never forget. There's no shame in trembling, only in giving up. Today, I'm not just standing, I'm walking forward. Her gaze found Clara in the front row. The crowd rose in applause. Clara simply smiled. Oh, after the ceremony, a young boy no older than 10 approached Clara. Are you the lady who hit 3 bullseyes in that famous match? Clara knelt, so they were eye to eye, smiling. Yes, but I didn't shoot to become famous. Then, why did you shoot? She thought for a moment, then said softly, to prove that people who've been forgotten still have a voice. And sometimes all it takes is one well-placed shot for the whole world to finally listen. That evening, Clara sat alone in her apartment, the same quiet space that had once held her grief in every corner, but now held peace. She opened the old wooden box again. Inside James's military ID, tag his training journals, his medals, and one envelope she had never dared to open. His last letter, delivered 2 days after the funeral, still sealed. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke it open. The paper had yellowed at the edges, but his handwriting was unmistakable, bold, steady, always deliberate. Clara, if you're reading this, I probably didn't make it back, but if anyone can handle that, it's you. You're stronger than you think always were. Someday you'll pick up a weapon again, not because you're afraid, but because you carry something worth protecting. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking you to live. And when the time comes, when you hold that weapon again, don't shoot just to hit the target. Shoot to remind the world. Silence is not weakness. Clara pressed the letter to her chest. Tears fell, but they weren't sharp or bitter. They were warm, healing, like rain that fell not to flood, but to cleanse. 1 week later, at the annual Honor and Precision Cup, the shooting world's most prestigious event, a new award was introduced. The Clara Bennett Honor Medal, presented to a marksman who not only demonstrates exceptional skill, but also embodies integrity, humility, and service to the community. The first recipient, a young woman in her 20s trembling slightly as she accepted the medal. It was Natalie. She turned to the audience and spoke softly. 6 months ago, I couldn't even hold a gun. Today I help others find strength through it, and I owe it all to the woman who saw me when the rest of the world turned away. The audience rose to its feet in a standing ovation. At the very back row, Clara sat still calm. She didn't need the spotlight. She didn't need her name chanted. She just turned the ring on her finger, no longer a symbol of grief, but of gratitude. On the wall of the James Bennett Center, a single quote was etched into a bronze plaque. Never underestimate the quietest person in the room, because when they finally speak, the world shifts. And so, Clara kept walking not to chase glory, but to carry a promise forward. For James, for Natalie, and for every silent warrior the world had forgotten. A crisp autumn morning, 1 year and 6 months after the match, leaves fell softly over the forest-fringed grounds of the James Bennett Center. Wind whispered through the trees like an old friend returning home. Inside classrooms were alive with quiet focus. The click of safety checks, the rhythmic breath of disciplined aim, the calm voice of instructors guiding students back to themselves. At the far end of the hallway, Clara Bennett stood by a window, watching the new class line up at the range. She wore no insignia, no name tag, just a beige jacket, dark jeans, and her ever-present wedding ring, weathered but worn with pride. Beside her, a visiting veteran instructor asked almost in disbelief, "You really trained all of them?" Clara smiled softly. "No, they trained themselves. I just reminded them they could." Later that afternoon, she sat at her usual spot on the back porch, sipping tea as the golden light filtered through pine branches. In her lap, a worn leather-bound journal, James's original training log. She flipped through it absent-mindedly, her fingers stopping at a familiar page. Clara, 50 yards, 9-10, bullseyes, calm under pressure, unshakable stance. May not know it yet, but she carries the kind of silence that commands storms. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Natalie stepped in, carrying a large envelope. Mail came. One looks important. Clara took it, opened it, and read, then smiled. That evening, Boston City Hall. A formal event had been arranged by the Veterans Council, honoring civilians and soldiers who had made extraordinary contributions to military communities. Clara was seated quietly in the third row, wearing a navy blue dress, simple, elegant, with no jewelry other than her wedding ring. When her name was called, she hesitated for a moment, then stood and made her way to the stage. As she accepted the glass-etched award, the mayor leaned in and whispered, "You don't just teach them how to aim, Ms. Bennett. You teach them how to return to themselves." She nodded grateful and stepped to the microphone. She didn't have a speech prepared. She never needed one. "This isn't about me. It's about the ones we almost forget until they remind us they never left. For every warrior who came home but couldn't find a way back to peace. This is your place now. The James Bennett Center belongs to you." Applause followed, not roaring or wild, but long, steady, sincere. Back at the center late at night, Clara walked the quiet range alone. Moonlight glinted off the metal targets in the distance. She stopped at the last station, the sniper lane. The same distance as that infamous 75-yard shot. The same model of Macmillan rifle resting on the bench. She sat down, loaded a single round, took a breath, then paused and smiled. "I don't need to fire it tonight, James. I already hit the mark." She stood safe in the silence. One final moment months later, a father and his young daughter walked through the center's public gallery. They stopped at a display that showed a photo. A woman standing calmly at a range mid-aim, eyes focused with a quiet fire. The plaque read, "Clara Bennett, widow marksman founder." She didn't fire to win. She fired to be heard. The girl tugged at her dad's sleeve. "Who is she really?" He looked at the image, thought for a long moment, then answered, "Someone the world almost missed, but never forgot again."